All right. Oh, and we have one more person to admit. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy to have you here today at the National Black MBA Association's Wednesday webinar. We have a featured speaker, Maisha Gatson, who is an experienced entrepreneur who will be discussing her journey and sharing some tips and tricks on how to become an entrepreneur. Before we get into her presentation, I'd just like to share a couple announcements for everybody's awareness on upcoming additional meetings. So just so you know, on June 19th, the National Black MBA Association will be engaging in an event with our corporate sponsor, Raymond James. We will be doing a food drive and having a chef demonstration. In addition, on June 22nd, we'll be having our general body meeting. So if you're on the email lister, we should have gotten an email about those, but be sure to check those out. We'd be happy to have you. And now we'll get into the features presentation with Maisha Gatson. I will read her biography. One moment, please. It's really long, so I really do need to look at my computer while saying this. Okay. Maisha M. Gatson is the founder and CEO of Pearl Long Term Care Solutions, Inc. Her company disrupts the way Americans plan their long term care by providing a platform that makes the process to find and finalize a long term care stay easy and accessible. Maisha has more than 15 years of experience in and out of government, working on healthcare policy, grassroots advocacy, government relations, developing alliances, and public and private partnerships, as well as research and development. Advocating for underserved people is where Maisha shines. Having worked with the Campaign for Black Male Achievement as program officer with the Black AIDS Institute as director of mobilization, and with the NAACP as director of their health national health department. Maisha currently serves as the president of the Stanford Entrepreneurship Club in DC and as the board member of Grow Your Future, a nonprofit organization focused on student self exploration, introspection, and providing them with tools for success in a global economy. Maisha earned her undergraduate degree in human biology with a concentration in medicine, law, and health policy from Stanford University in 2003. She earned a master's degree in public administration from New York University with a concentration in health policy and management in 2009. She earned a dual MBA and master's in finance from the University of Maryland Smith School of Business in 2020. Congratulations, 2020. Um,
Yay.
and she currently resides in Loudoun County, Virginia, with her husband and two children. So, all please welcome me and join Maisa Gatson to discuss her entrepreneurship journey. Yay!
Sarah, I told you that was going to be painful, even with the first. Um, so thanks for having me. Shout out to the DC Black MBA Association and their leadership for providing these resources to Black business members of the Black business community. Really honored to be a part of this Wednesday webinar. So I thought I'd talk a little bit off the cuff because I wanted this to be, conversational. And I took a bit of time just to think about, what are the things I wish I would have known before I jumped headfirst into this entrepreneurial journey, and how I could be helpful in potentially helping other entrepreneurs as they start, or helping other entrepreneurs, potential entrepreneurs that might be considering entrepreneurship. So really quickly, I would be remiss if I didn't take a minute to plug my business. Um, I was blessed to have two grandmothers named Pearl, both my maternal and paternal grandmothers. And so I like to tell this story of two pearls, and that's really how this was a personal passion. My business was born out of personal passion because my dad's mom, they both became immobilized and needed care at the end of their lives. My dad's mom was able to get that care in the comfort of her home from a family member who had medical training. Her house was newer and could be outfitted to accommodate her disability. My mom's mom, however, lived in an older house that couldn't accommodate her disability. She needed around the clock care, and it was more expensive to keep her at home than it was to put her in a facility. So my family reached out to me with my background in health policy to help them navigate all these government programs. And as you heard, I've spent most of my career working in health policy, including implementing Medicare Part D, the Affordable Care Act, and all of these, federal programs. And yet it was really hard for me to help my family navigate through this really difficult time. And so, the first thought for me was, if it's this hard for me with this experience, how hard must it be for millions of families that have to face these tough decisions every day? And so with that, I came up with an idea to basically create an online booking app for long-term care stays that is not just an online booking app, but it involves care team coordination. There's some common aspects as it relates to only needing to download the information once to share with multiple providers. You can message providers. You're able to bid on properties to save money. It is an inventory management and user management tool on the provider side. We are ready to launch here in the next 90 days. It's really tied up with my legal team, and we'll talk more on that. Just making sure I have my legal P's and Q's together before we go live and turn the switch on. So I worked with Sarah to, formulate the title of this discussion. And I know people are probably like, why is it titled Entrepreneurs Anonymous? Well, for many of you guys that know Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, it feels a little bit like you're in recovery when you're an entrepreneur. But also, I think that there's a lot of stuff that is not disclosed about the true entrepreneurial journey. And the first thing I'll say is that entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. Oftentimes it's over glamorized. Many times you see the entrepreneurs that have experienced success, but without the context of what it takes to get to that point. And honestly, there's no such thing as overnight success. And the other side of entrepreneurship is often dark and lonely. One of the things that I learned in one of my entrepreneurship classes is that I was kind of surprised about, but I can see why this is the case, is that entrepreneurs have a high rate of depression and suicide. So this is not, people, because their business is tied to their individual worth. It's a heavy burden to have. So I wanted to use this opportunity to provide a real perspective, and the truth of the matter is, it's not all the time glorious. A good idea doesn't mean automatic success. It's also timing, execution, luck, business, what's happening in the industry, and all those things have to align in the right ways at the right times in order for you to be successful. So I'll talk about things I've learned along the way in the hopes that my lessons will help you should you decide to embark on your entrepreneurial journey. I promise to talk about a few things on how to start and launch a business. And I'll say first that the leap to entrepreneurship is not for everyone. It is scary. I dodged my entrepreneurial calling for a very long time, and that manifested in me becoming more of an intrapreneur. So I would go into organizations, and I was always in the first in my role, like to create a new department or launch new initiatives. And those were the things I realized that excited me the most. And so to come up with new and novel ways of doing things. But it felt really, really scared to step out and hang my hat on just me and not be behind, kind of the veil of another organization, whether it be the NAACP or Amnesty International or Department of Health and Human Services. It was easy to be, kind of shielded by the reputation of those organizations and it not be just on me. And so that experience of just like realizing, and I was an entrepreneur and that, kind of my way of grappling with that was to create new things, and hitting my head over and over against the wall when I was in very bureaucratic organizations where change was not welcome. And so that always had a limit, and I would literally hit the wall, face first and crash hard. And that happened time and time again for me to realize that, like, I'm probably not meant to work for somebody. Like, I need to just like have a little bit more flexibility, have the ability to do new things and do things in a way that isn't going to be caught up by bureaucratic processes. The other thing is I had a supportive spouse. My husband believed in me. We had his income that could support the house, that, and also provide benefits, right, to me and my children. So there was thought around that, like, could we afford to make this for me to not work, and forego a six-figure salary so that so I can work on my dreams. And that took us agreeing to use our savings to start my business. And so enough cannot be said about, if you have a partner, having their support is key. The other thing that a lot of entrepreneurs do is a hybrid, which is, you keep your day job and you work on your business as a side hustle. And that is a very viable way to do this. Before I started Pearl, I had a consulting business that I did on the side of almost every job, where I would take on consulting contracts to do a whole bunch of things. And so it's, really viable option to do the hybrid. The second piece I'd say is do your homework. Know the federal and state requirements. Like, getting an EIN takes 5 minutes online, if you go to the IRS website. But you'll also need your EIN if you want to open a business bank account. You'll need your incorporation document. You'll need to have thought about what corporate structure you want. That has implications for the type for you doing fundraising, whether you go with an LLC or a C Corp. Once you register your EIN, you're now on the radar of the federal government. So there are things that come with that in terms of filing business taxes in a timely manner. And with the state, um, so just think about that. Like, for me, I initially incorporated in Virginia, and I ended up having to reincorporate in Delaware for legal reasons, because most of the corporate law is set in Delaware. And so it would have costed me more in the long run for me to stay incorporated in Virginia as it related to my legal fees. And so that was a decision I made with in concert with my attorneys. And so there are advantages and disadvantages. There are legal ramifications for each of those. I was able to get, because you can incorporate in Delaware, it requires a registered agent. But because my business was based out of Virginia, I also had to file in Virginia and pay business taxes here. So just, there are a lot of different quirks. There are also, kind of benefits as it relates to, if you're the states that you're incorporated and or doing business in, that you'll have access to resources. DC has a lot of programs to support entrepreneurs and Black entrepreneurs specifically. And so you can tap into that if you're doing your business out of DC. So those are just considerations. I would say the two most important hires that you'll make, and they don't have to be internal hires, is your legal team and your accounting team. Your legal team needs to touch almost everything, almost every decision you make. Like, I'll give an example today. I literally emailed my legal team and said, "Hey, we're thinking about doing this thing on the website where we would, include external reviews from other sites." And I said, "Is this okay? Or, are there any legal ramifications?" They were like, "No," they were like, "No, you're opening yourself up to this law and in this state." And I was just like, "Okay, thank you." But if I hadn't done that, or had a legal team that I could just reach out to, and a firm, like, I decided to go with one of the largest firms in the country that is known for corporate legal matters, because of the level of expertise, the fact that I can, send an email and hit the privacy team, the corporate team, the entrepreneurial team, the, whatever, all those different security, et cetera, and get all the legal perspectives. from that standpoint. And if there's somebody down the email, they'll pull them in. And so those pieces are super important. Like I said, once you're on the radar of the government, you're going to have to you're going to have to file business taxes, and that, that's most of the time you're at a loss. You're putting your own money in, but that needs to be recorded, and your losses can be carried forward. So once you're profitable, it can offset the taxes that you owe. So it's important that you have a record of that. So I'll stop there and just see if there are any questions, and then I'll get into my top 10. If there's any questions about kind of how to start a business or anything that I mentioned, because I know it was a little nuanced. Okay. Well,
Actually,
go ahead. Yep.
Can you talk a little bit more about your app? In particular, what apps that are currently out there inspired you or encouraged you that helped you create the vision for Pearl?
So that's really funny because I've had a major pivot because my original idea was a little too future forward to really be accepted. So I decided, hey, if we can get people to accept this pre-step, then they'll be ready for the next innovation, which is phase 2. So I would say that the Pearl platform, the easiest way to describe it for those who aren't familiar with long-term care, is it's like a Priceline slash Airbnb. So if you could submit bids on Airbnb for stays, combined with the messaging aspect of Airbnb, plus, like I said, the Common App. So you're downloading or uploading your information one time, and if you're considering multiple providers, you're able to send that information out to multiple venues, even though versus going to every location and filling out their specific paperwork. And then the one thing that I'm not sure is captured in any of those apps, and I'm not sure, I guess you could say it's almost like a WhatsApp, as it relates to, you can invite people into your care team, and you can favorite and share residences. You can rate them in your care team. You can discuss and come to decisions. You can give people permissions to take certain actions on your behalf, because a lot of times people who need long-term care are older and may not be, kind of tech savvy. And so they may be looking to their children or grandchildren to help. And so the platform kind of does all of those things and actually more, but it's hard to kind of talk about all of it. But basically you can come on and you can say, I want a short-term stay. This is the type of care I need on this date in this city or state. And then the results you get are real-time availabilities, residences that have listings that meet your criteria right now in real time, and that doesn't exist. And then at the same time, when you click into those residences, you're able to book a facility or book a room in a facility, and or bid if the provider allows bidding. And so there's a lot of flexibility there. It cuts out, a lot of running around. If anybody has had to do this for a loved one, you know that you had to go visit each facility individually. You had to go on a tour. You had to get hounded by millions of emails and calls from each facility. This streamlines the whole process. Sorry, that was long.
I also like to ask a question, Maisha. So just going along those same lines. So you mentioned about like Airbnb and like Priceline, and we know that anytime we use any of those types of apps, the minute you use those and say, hey, I want to take a trip to New York, for example, you start getting all of these like alerts, hey, you can go to this place, it's almost so now it's like your information is out there, right? So when it comes to healthcare, though, it's different, right? Because you go to like hospital and whatnot, everything is protected. So how is your app, like, how can you guarantee that once I put my information and once I put my loved one's information into your app, that that's also going to be protected?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, and this is part of the work I'm doing with my legal team, is making sure that all the technology that we've deployed during the development process does protect personal health information. It is actually required as a part of HIPAA compliance. But the one thing, so as it relates to, you mentioned the email notifications. So the first thing is you can opt out from the very beginning. It'll say, you know, there's a pop-up that says, do you want to get notifications about best deals? And basically the only time you're emailed is if there's something new that comes onto the platform that meets your search criteria that you might be interested in, but you can opt out of that. And then you can come into the platform and even save, share, or change your preferences. As it relates to your care team, because they will have access to your uploaded documents, we've had to put in legal language that allows a person to opt in sharing that information with their care team. So there's considerations as it relates to, you know, kind of the information that we're given to consumers, like during the flow process of the transaction, but also we have to, there's considerations as we update or create our terms and conditions, our privacy policy, all of those things have, you know, legal ramifications. We have to say up front how and where we share your information, how we'll use your information. And so making sure that all of those things are in alignment with HIPAA and privacy requirements as it relates to healthcare information. Hopefully I answer your question. Okay. So I'll dive really quickly. I don't know how quickly, because I tend to be long-winded, but I'm going to try to get through this pretty quickly. So 10 tips. Let's start. Number 1, network, 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 all caps, underlined, italicized. But you guys are in the Black, you know, the Black MBA Association, so I know you already know that. But what I would stress that might be a slightly different lens is that during your career, don't take anything for granted. Like, what's really important is not to burn bridges, because you never know who can help position you, who can validate you, or who can connect you in the future. And so I've been really purposeful about, you know, keeping in contact, having good relationships with my colleagues. And those relationships have paid off as it relates to, as I've stepped out as an entrepreneur, you know, meeting with them, getting the time, seeing if there's anything that, you know, any connections that they have that could help me. And they were open to that because of the types of relationships I cultivated during my career. Also, just think beyond just college or clubs, think church, past workplaces. I have, you know, a few grad school networks. So there are networks even that you don't think about that are really like church. You know, I ended up connecting with a few other Black women entrepreneurs through a women's Bible study. I didn't go there looking to meet other business owners, but and Black women business owners, but it was, through connecting with them and talking during Bible study, we were able to connect on those issues and be a support to each other as entrepreneurs. So, you know, it might not be where you'd go typically. I think it's obvious you go to your alumni or whatever, your alumni association, and look at, you know, people who went to the same school as you or in the same clubs, but think beyond that. Your neighbors, like I know my neighbors everywhere I've moved, and they've also been able to connect me in a number of instances. Number 2, you're not the first entrepreneur, so you don't have to figure out everything on your own. There are a huge number of resources for entrepreneurs online. There are mailing lists you can join. Every year there's a DC Startup Week that has a week full of free programming that starts at like 7 a.m. and goes to the evening with receptions. And you can pick and choose. It's all over the city at different locations. I've gone for I didn't go last year, obviously, but the 2 years prior to that. It's an excellent opportunity to meet other entrepreneurs, because sometimes I remember I mentioned that entrepreneurship is lonely. And so connecting with other entrepreneurs that can understand your journey is really helpful, because you realize it's not you that is only experiencing the loneliness or, you know, kind of the defeat because you were expecting to be in one place and you're not there. So these things are free. I would encourage you to search. There's like Co-Founders Lab, you know, register with the Entrepreneurship Magazine. There's just, I get a barrage of emails every day because I've signed up for all these lists. And, sometimes I just ignore them, but other times there's free webinars all the time, teaching you how to do pitch decks, giving you feedback. There's a lot of resources. Incubators, other founder resources. Like early on, I was accepted into Jason Calacanis's Founders University. And one of the things, he brought a lot of experts in for the 2-day workshop. But one of the other things he allowed us to do, even though we weren't like pitching for funding, he allowed us to pitch and get feedback from investors. And that was invaluable because then you could hear like where there was confusion about your idea, how you could better articulate what you're trying to do, both the problems and how you're the solution, and just refine. So there's lots of resources like that out there. I would say one of the first things I did, besides incorporating in Virginia and doing my EIN, was have a logo created and created business cards, because that makes you look official, and you are like, so just own it. And I made a big deal of getting these like really thick, kind of substantial business cards, because I wanted to stand out and not just be a business card like everyone else. And it wasn't that much more expensive. And I feel like it's paid off, because when I hand somebody my business card, they're like, whoa, okay, and it's like, okay, hopefully you remember me. So yeah, that's number 2. You don't have to figure it out. Number 3, you will make mistakes. It's part of the journey. You're not perfect. The people you work with aren't perfect. You're, like I talked about a little earlier, you will most likely pivot. Most entrepreneurs, when they get to success, the idea that they had at the beginning doesn't look anything like what it is when they go public and or when they see their greatest success. So just be open to that. I think, for me, it was really about listening to feedback from the people I had talked to about the idea, writing down their questions, seeing where there was like common questions and like, how could I address these things, or what am I not conveying, or what is their real hang up on why, when I was presenting to investors, like why they won't fund me. They say this idea is ingenious, but you didn't write a check, or when I'm talking to people in the industry, their facilities or provider facilities, they're like, oh my gosh, this is so ingenious, but they're not on the platform. So thinking about like, what is missing and getting that feedback is important, and knowing that mistakes are inevitable. Everybody has made them. I think that going through business school, and I think Sarah can attest, we were at Smith at the same time, doing the case studies was invaluable, because you realize that like business is messy, and even these well-seasoned, well-established companies experience times where they make mistakes or hire the wrong people and lose money to the tunes of billions. As an entrepreneur in the early days, you're hopefully not losing that amount of money, but it might feel that way if you're, investing your own savings. But I think just get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's really hard to do. I'm a perfectionist. And so I have to talk myself down a lot about, it's not going to happen overnight. It's happening the way it needs to, all of that. And to that point, number 4, intrinsic motivation is key. For me, I had to realize that a lot of my, I was used to performing to get praise. Like in every job I was in, I always got promotions or acknowledgements or awards. When you're an entrepreneur, that does not come. It's few and far between, if at all. And so you really do have to be intrinsically motivated, because you don't get external validation much. And even when you do, like I mentioned before, when someone's like, oh, you're brilliant, oh, your idea is amazing, it doesn't always produce a win. And so you just have to you have to be the thing that drives you every day, and know that, I'm a woman of faith. So I know that, every contact I've had, every contact that didn't work out, like that was not meant to be, and be okay with that, and be okay with, the validation is that God gave me the green light to go do this. And, he's given me the provision to keep doing it. And so number 5, even so-called losses can be flipped into wins. And I know, I've heard ad nauseum, every failure is a lesson. And that's true. But like I talked about, you can use the feedback to refine or pivot. For me, I got an opportunity to have an audience with one of the largest long-term care provider, well, the largest long-term care provider in the country. And I got this amazing feedback, like, this is amazing, you're on to something. But then I couldn't get them on the hook to do anything. And so what it said to me, in addition to talking to other people in the industry, was maybe this is just too far for them right now. What could I do to take a step back so that they get comfortable with me before they're putting too much on the line? And what's the win-win for them? Like with them. One thing was to help, consumers, but what do providers get? So I had to think about and do my research on what are their pain points. And I found that there's a near constant 10% unoccupancy rate in the industry. And for a lot of companies, it's much larger than that. And so there are beds that are sitting empty in their facilities that are not only are they not revenue centers, but they're cost centers because they still have to staff at a regulatory and, up to regulatory compliance, even if the beds are empty, because someone could hypothetically walk in off the street and they have to be ready to receive them. They still have to heat the room. They still have to cool the room, so these are cost centers. And so how can I frame, you participating in our platform as an opportunity to turn a cost center into a revenue center, and being able to communicate that in a very clear and concise way and make the journey as easy as possible, not just for the providers, but for the consumers, and take away as many pain points along the way. And so having the feedback, that mechanism from people in the industry and from potential investors helped me get there and helped me get to the pivot. So it's like really important not to be so wed to your way of doing it or the way you initially saw it, but to be open. Number 6, funding. That's the big question. I think you have to be really thoughtful about if you want outside investors at all. And if you do, when. The one thing that I will say is you have to have extremely thick skin. You have to be prepared to get 99 no's to get 1 yes. And, it often takes multiple rounds of emails and calls and like warm connections, and fundraising is not fun. And there's a mixed bag of investors, and so you need to think really thoughtfully about who, if you want to get outside funding, who you're in bed with, because they'll be associated with your company. And many times when you're getting private equity funding, they want a board seat and they definitely want a percent of your company. And you have to think about whether it's worth that to give up that percentage of your company, because you also lose control with that. Most investors want to see that you have some skin in the game, and that's called, many times bootstrapping. So they want to see that you've put your time and resources into the business. One of the things I'll say is that this is where Black entrepreneurs are a little bit disadvantaged. They want to see that you bootstrapped and then that you had a friends and family round. As you guys probably know, most of us don't have a huge friends and family network with disposable income to invest in your hopes and dreams. And so there's a very limited pool for us as Black entrepreneurs to even raise a substantial friends and family round. But I think, even if you can get somebody who is an early investor that believes in you, whether it's a friend and family or colleague, that goes a long way with investors. I will say, and I've witnessed it, implicit bias, be prepared, you're going to see it. 99% of investors are white men. And so there's implicit bias there. There's also sexism there. I realized that, as a Black woman, I was doubly disadvantaged. And I talked to another Black woman entrepreneur, and what she said is she had seen research about the fact that there's cognitive dissonance when you're a Black woman presenting to a white man, and you're intelligent and and well-spoken. I hate when people say articulate, but, and they can't wrap their heads around the stereotypes of what Black women are and that you're not that. And so they can't even receive what it is that you're saying or your idea. They're stuck on that. And so, you will have these biases. I've even joked about hiring a white actor to present to investors on behalf of my company to see. I just want to do an experiment to see if it would yield any different results. I might still do it, but just to see. I mean, just, something to go in, just knowing that it's something you have to encounter and be thoughtful about how to combat. Also, raising private equity is not the only way. There are non-equity funding programs like through the government, the SBIR program. That's not easy. I've gone through the process of applying. It is extremely time consuming, and the way they want the application is very specific and scientific and rigorous. And they want kind of an academic perspective, which doesn't always fit, depending on what your business model is, it might not fit the program. The other thing is loans or credit cards. A loan doesn't take equity from your business, you just pay it back. So, you have to think about, is it worth me taking, $500,000 for 50% of my company, or can I take a $500,000 loan out for, that I pay back over, 10 years and I still maintain control, or I can kick the can down the road to, until I need to do a larger raise. 7, build the right team, but know that the team you start with will not likely stay the same. Again, I found that being a Black entrepreneur that wanted to build a team of really smart Black people, I went in with that intention. I wanted my team to be the opposite of the industry that is mostly male and mostly white. I wanted, to create this business that empowered Black business people within my company. However, what I found in my bootstrapping phase is that most Black people can't bootstrap. And so after I wasn't able to pay them, after a few months, like they didn't have the capacity or the ability to continue to work on the business, because they had other financial obligations. And so that's, that's the breaks. Like I've had, 3 iterations of different teams where that's happened. And, you just have to accept that especially in an early stage startup, there's always staff turnover. And so that's going to be a part of the journey. And I think, also learning about, along the way of like how that should impact your hiring decisions. I hired friends. It comes with advantages and disadvantages. I think for me, it was initially a trust issue. Like I felt like I could trust my friends with my idea. However, you have to be willing to forego, like if something goes wrong in your business, which it will as an early stage startup, you might not only be sacrificing that person as a member of your team, but your friendship. So you have to weigh those 2 options. Also, outsourcing might just be what you need to do. I outsourced my legal counsel, my accountant. I'm looking to outsource marketing, my tech development. And what it does is it keeps, kind of my overhead low. I don't have to pay benefits. So early stage, that might just be the way to go. You can hire consultants in each of these areas. But, the other piece is, a lot of early stage startups do equity versus pay. But be careful because they could forever be linked to your company even after they're gone. And so a lot of investors will look to see if you have created a vesting schedule. So it means that like most vesting schedules start with a 1-year cliff. So if you don't stay in the business for at least 1 year, you get nothing, you walk away with nothing. And then you vest over a period of 3 years. A percentage of whatever the total is. And unless you stay those whole times, that whole 3 years, you may get if you between 1 and 3 years, you'll get some percentage based on how many months you stay in. So it's one way to kind of protect your business so that like you don't have a whole bunch of, past team members that have an axe to grind, still having control or some piece of your company. 8, I would say these next 3 just fall under the adapting to external factors. 1, know your industry and how your innovation fits into the ecosystem. Get early buy-in from industry leaders, seek advisors in the industry, and really quick, easy thing is to set up Google alerts for the companies that are top, leaders in your industry, for the buzzwords that you'd want to see news stories on. And get those daily and just keep up to speed on it. Like for instance, I got a Google alert that there's a company that is trying out a new luxury assisted living community concept, and 3 of their 4 locations are located in the DMV area. And so they're opening on a rolling out basis that will start now, but then there's one that's opening later this year and one that's opening next year. And so I'm going to go to them and say, hey, I'm your occupancy solution. This is a new concept. You can come on the Pro platform. But if I hadn't set that Google alert, I might not have known that this was a new kind of trend and be able to use that trend as a way to capitalize for my business. The other thing is COVID. COVID happened. One of the first set of cases happened in a nursing home. And so what you saw over the course of 2020 was occupancy rates declining rapidly for these businesses. And a lot of them shuttered their doors and will never open again. And even the big companies were really hard hit. And so again, I'm like, hi, I'm Pro Long-Term Care Solutions. I can help fill those beds and get your occupancy rates up. So just knowing how current economic things will impact the industry and how you can use that to the benefit of your business is really important. Knowing the general business landscape, when COVID happened, I kept my eye on resources that were going to be available to businesses. And I figured out, I took the time to read regulation and all kinds of technical papers from the SBA to understand the PPP and EIDL programs. And I was able to get almost $1 million of funding. And so that kicked the can down the road to where I didn't have to get investors. And I had money that in large part will be forgiven and be a free grant to my business from the government. Hello, hallelujah. And so, a big part of that, I mean, this was game changing for me. And COVID was the thing that opened the door, because the SBA before COVID, and they relaxed a lot of their restrictions. 1, it was credit based. 2, it was collateral based. 3, there was a personal guarantee. So what that means is you had to have collateral equivalent to the amount of the loan that they could back up the loan with. The personal guarantee is that if something went down with your business, they would come after Maisha Gatson, the individual, not just my business. Right now, through PPP and EIDL, there's no collateral requirements. They weren't even allowed to run your credit, and there's no personal guarantee. It will never be as easy for businesses, specifically Black businesses, to get government funding as it was / is kind of still. And the last thing I'll say before I stop is pay it forward. What I found is that if you support other entrepreneurs, that will come back to you. Make introductions, offer advice, be a resource, share resources. Like I mentioned, I figured out how to successfully get through the PPP and EIDL programs. So then I created a webinar to help other Black entrepreneurs get through it, because I was having one-on-one conversations. I was like, it's too much. I'll set a time. Let's do what, I sent out emails to the entrepreneurs I knew, said forward it to whoever. I'm giving an hour, 2 hours to walk you guys through the programs. And I'll post the PowerPoint slides on my website if you need to access that, or the recording if you can't make it. And then at the same time, I was in a fellowship with the NAACP, so I used that platform to even get further reach. And as they had webinars talking about COVID, I made sure that the information was given to those who, those thousands of people that were on NAACP webinars that might be business owners. So, be a resource. People will support you, and it'll come back to you. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions. if you guys want to discuss anything.
Hey, Maisha, I have a question while others are thinking of theirs. My question is about protecting yourself and your idea when you were communicating with potential customers and partners. Um, is it just a risk of being an entrepreneur that when you pitch your idea that it's possible that someone might try to replicate it? Or is there a way for you to protect yourself, especially when you're communicating with these bigger businesses who might have the resources in order to make their own version of Pearl?
Yeah, so that was really important to me. What I did was get my legal team to create a mutual non-disclosure agreement. And for me, it was important to engender trust by doing a mutual NDA, because like most people have an NDA that just protects them or their business. But my coming to it from I also want to respect whatever business secrets you have, and so we can come into this conversation and exchange, information freely. And so I didn't have a conversation with Brookdale until they signed the mutual non-disclosure agreement. Now their legal teams are going to come back with, they want to make this change and that change, and I had to go back to my legal team and say, is that okay? So there's a little bit of wrangling, especially with these big companies. But at the end of the day, it got signed, and then I could have these, be able to talk about my business idea with them. I also did mutual non-disclosure agreements for everybody I talked to, including friends. I literally had a dinner meeting where I was pitching the idea at the very, very early stage, and I had printed out NDAs and said, okay, before we get started, I need you guys to sign this. And it was just like, this is real. Like, this is, I don't think y'all will steal my idea, but I still need to protect, and investors are going to see that you took the steps to do that, and that you were proactive in doing that. The other thing is, I think you will be laughed out of the room if you ask an investor for an NDA. Investors are not going to replicate your idea. That's not what they're in the business of doing. And so there is, some quote unquote risk. But if you want to put yourself out there to get funding, you are going to have to talk about your idea, and they will not sign an NDA. So you just have to know that, that in that space, it'll make you seem inexperienced and delusional if you were to ask an investor for an NDA. And so you have to be just comfortable with the investors that you're pitching to, and, make sure that they have integrity. Like, I look at the companies that they fund and see if I know anybody, and, kind of ask the question, like, how are they? Do you trust them? Have you had a good relationship? Have they added value? Like, would you recommend, that this is the whole other point about other entrepreneurs. I literally turned down funding because I talked to other entrepreneurs that have been funded by this one source, and they were just like, they give small checks and then they make you jump through all these hoops for no reason. I don't need that. Like, if you're going to write a big check, I'll give you big time, but you don't get big time for a small check, So just, it's all those things come into consideration. But yes, do everything you can to protect your idea. But there are some instances where, there is some level of exposure. You do have to also have your pitch, like your elevator pitch, and figure out how you can talk about it without giving too much information so someone can replicate your idea. The reality is that 9.9 times out of 10, most people do not have the resources or the resources, wherewithal, or desire to replicate your idea. And so, yes, protect yourself, but know that in order for you to make the connections you need to be able to talk about it at a level that's accessible, but doesn't compromise, your idea and the idea that it could be replicated. Any other questions?
You said that you are going to be launching your brand in the next 60 to 90 days. So I take it you do have a couple of investors lined up and you're kind of past that stage, right?
Well, I was able to get PPP and EIDL funds that has basically allowed me to not have to get outside investors. It was really funny actually, like I had lined up calls with investors and got personal, like Derek Johnson from the NAACP connected me with his really good friend who is an investor, and I had calls lined up with them around the same time I got the PPP loans, and I literally got on the phone and was like, yeah, thanks for your time, but we got this free money and I'm not raising right now. And they were just like, okay, well, let us know when you are. So I've been able to kick the can down the road. I have warm leads and people who believe in what I'm doing. And that's the other thing about investors. Most 9 times out of 10, the idea for them, the idea is a very small part of the equation. They first want to believe in you as an entrepreneur, and have faith in you and your ability to execute. And then they want some assurances around the industry and the idea, but most of them know that they're investing in the person, and maybe your first idea won't be the idea, because for most people it isn't, but that they're investing in you in the long haul of your entrepreneurial journey. So long story short, I haven't had to raise. Thankfully, I'm 100% owner of my company. I will hopefully, as long as I can keep that, I want to keep that, and not give away any control. But to get to Series A, to the point where you're running national ads and things that are going to be really expensive, I will likely have to do a big raise, like in the tens of millions of dollars. And so I am gearing up for that. Fun times.
It's just I'm sorry, one more question. It's just focus on the DMV area. Are you national?
National.
Thank you.
We will have on launch day about 12,000 facilities across the nation on the platform. So when you search, you'll be able to see, get results from pretty much wherever you're looking or within a certain radius. And I'll say that was a tactical decision. Like, I'm launching nationally, but I will focus my marketing efforts in certain pockets. So I'm looking at the states where people are most likely to retire and the states with the highest concentration of long-term care facilities, to throw marketing dollars and geo target my marketing efforts there. So while I will have facilities listed nationally on the platform itself, where I'm spending my time and my money, garnishing brand awareness and awareness of the platform itself is based, on those other factors. So it's kind of a bifurcated approach. And, we had initially thought about, do we just launch? And, we thought about just DMV or just East Coast, DMV, Pennsylvania, New York. But the reality is that the risk of doing that allowed entry, like an entry level competitor risk. So if I only launched in DMV, I would allow my competitors the opportunity to build and to launch in other markets. And so, weighing those two things is what allowed me to make the decision that we'll launch nationally, but we'll focus marketing dollars in very specific pockets initially.
I have a question.
Sure.
Good evening. My name is Almi, and I'm a young entrepreneur. And I had, launched my business right before COVID, and then kind of COVID slowed it down. So just curious, like, what advice would you have for like a new, like brand new young millennial entrepreneur?
Yeah. So let me ask you just a clarifying question. Had you incorporated before COVID?
Yeah, I got my LLC registered before COVID. Yes.
Okay. Were you able to take advantage of any of the SBA resources?
No. I wasn't.
So I would say start there. I talked a little bit about how, it will never be as easy for a Black business to get government funding ever. I don't think. I think this is going to be like a once in a generation thing that happens. Because I think you have to show that you were in business before February 15th, 2020. And as long as you can show that you were incorporated or you had an EIN by then, you can apply for the Paycheck Protection Program, which helps to, if you use 60% of the loan to cover payroll costs, it can be completely forgiven. Or you can apply for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Initially, you could qualify for loans up to $2 million. Because of the high demand, they capped everybody. Even if you qualified for $2 million, they capped you at 150. They've recently increased that cap to 500,000. So if you apply now, you can, be in the queue to potentially get $500,000 in funding for your company. But I would say this, beyond just the funding, I think stay the course, be linked to other entrepreneurs. Know that, Pearl wasn't my first idea. It wasn't my first entrepreneurial endeavor. So as a young entrepreneur, this probably won't be your first or your last idea. And if you've already stepped out as an entrepreneur, then I take it you kind of have an entrepreneurial mindset. And so just continue to try to connect in the network of other entrepreneurs and stay plugged in. And so even when your ideas shift or your company needs to change directions, you'll be, kind of plugged in. And know, like, again, a lot of this is, I don't want to say validation, but it's lonely and it's hard to be an entrepreneur, and just having other entrepreneurial friends to validate like your experience, or know that like you're not the only one that was affected negatively by COVID.
Right.
And how other entrepreneurs are dealing with that. I think I have a bit of the opposite. Like COVID actually helped my business in a weird way. But I think that was the other thing, is how can you turn something that is on its head negative into a positive for your business, and always be thinking about that. Those would be my biggest tips and advice. But congratulations for starting your business and being a young entrepreneur.
Thank you.
Yeah. Stay the course. It's not easy. It is not.
Yeah, no, it's not. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anyone else? I'm trying to think if there's anything I forgot. I was like sitting here, like, what did I forget to mention? The NDA question was a really good one because I did forget that.
I do have another question that's a little bit off topic, but also this is all me again. And I also have an MBA, but I noticed that even with an MBA now, like the workforce is kind of different, and I feel like there's a lot of people with master's degrees that are still not getting like the pay that they're worth. Do you think that's one of the major reasons why a lot of people are switching to entrepreneurship, even with like master's degrees or PhDs?
I think yes. I think specifically for Black entrepreneurs, because we've always been most likely to be undercut, underpromoted, underpaid, Black women even more so. It's funny, I think this phenomenon is played out in a lot of different areas as it relates to Black people. A friend of mine just sent me an article about Black homeschooling amongst Black parents is on the rise. And my response was, yeah, because the education system repeatedly fails our kids, and the only way we can, protect them is pull them out. I think entrepreneurship is a lot like that. How many times do you have to get beat up, passed up, kind of taken for granted, everything thrown on you, and your pay doesn't, kind of reflect that, to where you're just like, what's the risk of doing something on my own is is not as great as me continuing to be in a workforce that doesn't appreciate my expertise and or will never value me as an employee. And I think it took me getting to that point where it was just like, you know, I'm tired of hitting my head. I'm tired of crashing into this wall over and over and over and over. And realizing that my true value and what I could bring to the table could only be realized to a fraction of what it truly is. And that I was risking, you know, a lot of times people think that having a 9 to 5 and or a W-2 paycheck is less risky than, you know, kind of being on your own. But quite frankly, most businesses in the country are at will. They can like you one day and say they don't like your hair color the next day and not have to provide you with any reason and let you go. So there's this false notion of security because somebody else is paying you your paycheck versus you having more security because you are now the author of your own story. So I think, you know, I do think that is having a lot to do with why you see entrepreneurship, you know, people stepping out of the workforce. I think the workforce also has not evolved enough to keep in line with technological trends. You know, I think COVID has turned that upside down, but even my previous employer before I left, they didn't support teleworking. Like, why do I have to be here sitting there looking at you in the face when most of the stuff I'm doing is on my computer? Like, I can do that from home, not have to commute into DC, pay all this, you're losing hours of my work by me coming into the office because I got to commute 2 ways, 2 hours this way, 2 hours that way. I get here tired and frustrated because I sat in traffic and I didn't want to pay a $40 toll and a 66 to get there quicker, you know? So I think it's those two things. I do think that there's a rude awakening that needs to happen with the future of work. I think we're going to start to see some of that unveil in the coming years. And I think COVID kind of gave that a kick in the butt. The question is, will that be enough? But entrepreneurship is the lifeblood of this country's economy. And so I don't think that it is abnormal that, you know, entrepreneurship is an avenue that many people are seeking. I think that on the contrary, you know, 99% of America's businesses are small businesses. And I think what we're starting to see now is Black people catching up to that trend and being a little more comfortable, you know, stepping out of their quote unquote security bubble.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Any other burning questions? Oh, networking, professors. Go back to your old professors. I don't know, has everybody, Sarah, everyone in the association has already gotten their MBA? Or are there people in the process of it?
There are some students, but I would say the majority of members have finished their schooling.
Okay. I was just gonna say, like, because I had my business while I was in MBA, I made as much as I could, every group or other presentation or thing we had to do, I tried to make it benefit my business. Like, it was like, I don't want to spend my time twice. Let me get the buy-in from my professors. So if I do this report, can I do it in a way that's going to help me with my business? And then the other thing is, you know, seeking out professors in your area, or, you know, you may not have encountered in your program. Like, I did some cold emails to Maryland professors that, you know, were connected to what I'm doing with Pearl to see, you know, if there are any advice or resources they could offer. So that, you know, and having that validation, like, one of my professors connected me to an investor, you know, and he's well regarded in the entrepreneurial, you know, community. But if I hadn't sought him out and gotten coffee with him and talked about my business, that might not have happened. So just, you know, every opportunity is an opportunity for you to connect and to potentially have somebody invest in you or your business. And it may not always be funding. It could be the small things like a connection or somebody that will vouch for you, but it all matters in the grand scheme of things.
Any more last questions? Anybody having issues getting off mute?
No, thank you so much for this presentation. Very, very helpful.
Thank you. I hope to be a resource. If folks want to reach out to me, my email is maisha@pearlltc.com. Happy to be a resource. Should you, want a listening ear, need some advice, etc. And that's MYISHA@pearlltc.com.
Let me see if we can put that in the chat so people can get it.
I can put it in here.
All right, y'all have it now.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing, I mean, Black people supporting other Black people and Black businesses is how we're all gonna, see progress. And so, I think being resources to each other, I'm happy to be a resource. I am such an advocate of empowering and advocating for the Black community. And I don't think that while my business isn't just for Black people, a lot of the decisions and the connections I have are in the Black community. And so uplifting and empowering each other is really, it's going to be key. It's key to me. But I think even to, just the viability of the Black entrepreneurial ecosystem, the more we can support each other and be a part of each other's success stories, the better we'll all be.
Absolutely. Well said, Maisha. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. And to our attendees, thank you for so much for coming. I hope you found it valuable, and I hope that this gives you some encouragement to step a little bit outside your comfort zone and think about your next steps. And I forget who said it, but it's something I heard at one of our meetings. Somebody gave a presentation. A job might be nice, but it's not something you can pass on to your children. And what you're doing, Maisha, is something that's building family wealth, family legacy. So proud of you, and thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Have a good night.
Have a good evening, everyone. Take care.
Bye.